you can, look out over the marsh, or you can look out over some of the tidal areas, but it's not really the same as being out on the water itself. People, oftentimes, if they've not been there before, are truly amazed at the diversity and expanse of the wetlands, how big Crosswicks Creek is. I mean, it's sort of really a misnomer to call Crosswicks Creek a creek because it's actually a sizable river.
The wild rice, some of it's just in a perfect flower here.
Being in a canoe gives people a different appreciation because you're actually out on the water and you can see wetland areas really close up. When we take a canoe trip, we usually have a little bit of introduction about the marsh to begin with. I tell them how big it is. It's 1,250 acres of marshland by itself, and if you count the undeveloped areas around it, it comes to about 3,000 acres. So it's a fairly substantial area in a very urbanized setting. This is a tidal freshwater marsh. Oftentimes people, when they hear the word tides, want to think in case of salt water, but because it's freshwater and you don't have the limiting features of salinity, you get a large diversity of plants.
A tidal freshwater marsh, because of the fact you don't have the salt stress, has higher species diversity. So here you might have a dozen or more, both annual and perennial species. In a salt marsh, you would have perhaps one or two, and they'd be perennial species. So the salt really does add a stress beyond just being able to tolerate the inundation, the water that's present. There's much more obvious heterogeneity differences among the organisms that are here compared to a salt marsh. Salt marsh, in many cases, is fairly low vegetation. Here, with the wild rice that we saw, and with some of the other plants, you can get plants that are 6 to 8 feet tall, and it's really very, very different aspect than a salt marsh. We've done a plant inventory for the wetland area as well as some of the surrounding uplands, and we have 875 species. So we have a diversity of habitats, and that diversity of habitats allows a large number of species to grow. Wild rice is an annual grass, and it grows, this one, I don't know, is maybe 6 feet tall or so, but it can grow, 8 or more feet, and it does it all in 1 year, so it's pretty remarkable. The plant has some remarkable adaptations. The seeds will germinate almost entirely underwater, so they don't require normal conditions like you would for garden plants, for example. There's some other kinds of adaptations that are pretty amazing. If you take a look at the stem, and this happens in other aquatic plants as well, is that you can have this really terrific pattern inside, and this is sort of like the strut work of an airplane. It gives you a lot of support with relatively little energy. This plant is giant ragweed, and it, like wild rice, is an annual, and all this growth happens in one growing season. And so to me, it's pretty remarkable. And one thing that some early researchers in this marsh found is that tidal freshwater marshes rival tropical rainforests in the amount of plant material that's produced in 1 year. The tide comes in and goes out, and it keeps the bottom portion of these plants wet, and in response to that you get these dense growth of aerial roots along the stems so that these roots can take up nutrients out of the water as it goes by them.
One other thing is it's really fun to share it with people. So, you know, a group of one or a group of students, I'm really interested in the opportunity to bring the marsh in some way to those people so that they can have a little bit of an experience, to make them more observant of nature, to have them have a better appreciation of things out of doors. It makes them think perhaps about wetlands in a different context than they might have otherwise.